Hi, I'm Saida Garrett, co-writer of Michael Jackson's Man in the Mirror, and you're listening to Rainbow Country with Mr. Mark Tara.
The views and opinions expressed on the following program are those of the persons appearing on the program.
Today on Rainbow Country, a spotlight on American trans artist Cameron Daniel Grubb, plus award-winning filmmaker Brett Morgen talks about his latest David Bowie documentary, Moonage, Daydream. That and more in episode 363, so stay tuned. The Gay Talk Radio right here on Rainbow Country.
Hello, my name is Conchita.
And I'm Barbecue.
And my name is Hardcora. And we are the Beat Girls.
You're listening to
Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
Well, hello and welcome to a brand new journey through Rainbow Country. As I like to call it, a little gay radio show working to give voice to the LGBT community and beyond. And as always, I am your tour guide through Rainbow Country. I'm producer and host, Mark Tara. By the way, Rainbow Country originates from CIUT-FM in Toronto and now proudly in syndication on 12 outlets across Canada, from coast to coast to coast. The Yukon, British Columbia, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, the east coast of Canada in Newfoundland, Ontario, even down to Buffalo, New York, and online. Well, thanks to you tuning in, streaming, downloading, but ultimately listening. Together we continue to build Rainbow Country into a nationally syndicated gay radio show, a #1 LGBT podcast on Podomatic.com's gay and lesbian chart, as well as being recognized as Canada's #1 LGBT podcast on feedspot.com. So today, American trans artist Cameron Daniel Grubb joins me to talk about music, LGBT and trans issues, and more. Plus a flashback to my TIFF 2022 coverage with award-winning filmmaker Brett Morgen, who talks about his latest documentary, Moonage, Daydream, a film that features never-before-seen footage, performances, and explores the creative, spiritual, and musical journey of David Bowie. Plus in hour 2, music from LGBT artists, independent artists, voices that we've come to know and love in classic disco, classic 80s, classic house, and on this episode I'm featuring some funk, some Carol Pope, and more. All that lies ahead as we start Journey 363 through Rainbow Country, and our first stop, the Rainbow Country Bookstore. Today, award-winning playwright and author Brad Fraser reads from his memoir, All the Rage. All the Rage is available wherever you get your favorite books, and on Amazon.ca, the memoir has a rating of 4.7 out of 5 stars.
That autumn, Kate left town to do a show, and Tad sublet his place and moved in with me. One autumn night after leaving the club with Richard, the three of us went for a bite at a nearby restaurant. Afterwards, we took a shortcut through the alley that ran next to the Odeon Theatre. By the time we were partway up the alley, we realized we were being followed by 4 men about our age. We shared a quick look and quickened our step. Our pursuers did the same, saying they were going to take Tad's fleece-lined leather coat off him. Tad said to them, "Come on, guys, we don't need any trouble." They laughed. We could hear them whispering, "Faggots, cocksuckers, why are you walking so fast? Scared?" We were terrified. We were also 3 guys who worked out, and they didn't look all that big. Just as we emerged from the alley across the street from the Hudson's Bay store, they rushed us. I could feel adrenaline flushing through my system. My father didn't teach me much in my childhood, but he did teach me how to put up a guard and throw a punch, and I started roaring insults at them in my most demonic voice. I blocked a couple of punches and slapped my attacker away just as I heard Tad call my name. 2 of them were moving in on him. Richard was holding his own with his attacker, landing a few decent blows, so I punched one of Tad's assailants in the side of the head. He made a pained noise, and amazingly, they all took off. As we walked up Jasper Avenue, we were sky high with our victory, giddy and shaky. We dropped Richard off at his place and continued on to mine. As we passed under the dark shadow of the old train overpass that used to cross Jasper Avenue just west of 109th Street, we became aware of footsteps behind us. Our hearts sank. The whispering started again. The quartet was back, and now we were just 2. Eventually, I ended up at the gay bar. I checked my parka and sidled up to the bar. There were more staff than patrons, but I wasn't there for company. As I ordered my usual Labatt's Blue, I caught the eye of an emaciated older man in an expensive leather coat staring at me from the other side of the square bar. Something about him seemed familiar. He smiled. It was Benny, my old fuckbud Benny, the beautiful muscle man with a fat uncut cock, melon-like ass cheeks, and girlishly smooth skin. It was obvious he was in the late stages of AIDS. As I moved around the bar to greet him, I tried to hide my shock behind a surprised smile, but he saw right through it. As we hugged, he said, "It's okay." And that was the extent of our conversation about his health. I took the stool next to his as he looked me over with a smile, saying, "You're all right?" I nodded. "Good," he said. "Some of the guys I fucked with, they're not all right." Having no idea how to respond, I said, "It's good to see you. You too. When I first got sick, I was laid up for a while, but I read about you when I started traveling again." Something hit me. "What happened to your accent?" Benny always had that sexy Texan twang. I remembered what he'd told me about himself in our first few meetings, born in Texas, a couple of brothers, worked at something to do with the steel industry, sales maybe, had a life partner who was much younger, and a brother who'd gotten into drug trouble in South America. Benny said, "Everything I told you about myself is a lie." He went on to explain to me he wasn't from Texas. He was from someplace in the Maritimes, and he didn't work in the steel industry. He worked for a major coke cartel that was smuggling blow into the country. I was so gobsmacked. Most people have an alter ego, but queer people in those days often had many identities, mostly forged out of necessity. We did what we had to do in order to survive. Nonetheless, when he was done, all I could do was gape at him. I said, "Everything?" He said, "Except the stuff about my partner. That was real." I had no idea what to say. Benny said, "All those condos and apartments we fucked in were safe houses. You have no idea the danger I put you and other people in. I had some pretty nasty people after my ass." I shook my head in shock. He put his hand over mine. It was cool, already slightly dead. "So what's happening with you?" Benny ordered us 2 more beers, and I brought him up to date with my life, Pete, and the play. When I was done, I could tell he was tired, so I offered to see him back to his hotel, but he said he was fine. He got off the stool to hug me, and I could feel the bones move loosely beneath his skin like the last few pretzel sticks in a nearly empty bag. Benny said, "Don't waste a minute." I kissed him quickly.
Hi, everybody. This is Gino Vanelli. You're listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
Up next, the words and music of American trans artist Cameron Danielle Grubb. Cameron Danielle Grubb, hi, how are you?
I'm well. How are you, Mark?
I am good. I have to say thank you for being here, to have your voice, your story be heard by the LGBT community and beyond. So thank you for that. Let's start here. I believe it was a couple of years ago you reached out to me to introduce me to your music. I fell in love with your music. Paper Bag, love that track. I play it here on Rainbow Country across Canada. But I know you as Danielle Grubb, but you've I'm assuming recently gone through a transformation and you're now Cameron Danielle Grubb. So here's where I'd like to start with this new version of you, who you truly are, your authentic self, and essentially coming into your power. Talk to me about when this started for you, this transition to become Cameron.
This was... Oh my goodness, my journey is very complicated, but I was 26 and turning 27, and I was in therapy. I was in like CBT, and I loved it. And then I was still unhappy and couldn't find any LGBTQIA groups. I'm also an intersex person, and so being intersex, my whole life I was kind of confused about gender and was quietly practicing gender queerness, I guess. But after that therapy that I had, there were 3 days at the end of the year where I was just crying like 3 days straight. And I decided to go get gender and sexuality-based therapy. And so with a therapist, it was brought out to me that I might have been trans, or that I am trans and also intersex. And so as soon as I had the identity talk with my therapist, I had the relaxation of sort of fitting into your own puzzle piece. And I noticed I started carrying myself different. I started speaking different. And then for me, I had a lot of depression, and my therapist was saying, maybe you should try tea. Not suggesting, but, leading you there. And then I started taking tea on August 18th of 2021. Or 2020. Was it 2020? It was during COVID, I thought. So 2020, it was August of 2020. And then I felt better, but more like myself. And, found that my external environment in Texas was not as queer as I wanted. And so I moved to Los Angeles, and I'd recently, I started transitioning, met a person, so I fell in love, and that helped a lot. I tried to learn another language. I tried to start a business and everything. And so all that to say, my whole perspective on life changed, and not necessarily myself. But I would attribute, if you want to talk about like stepping into your power, the big thing for me was my sexuality, and my sexuality changed because I was always a lesbian, and at one point I thought I was bisexual. But when I started taking testosterone, I noticed that I was beautiful, and then started becoming attracted to cisgender men and trans people and agender people as well. And that changed my music a lot. So yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
It's interesting that you mentioned about your not just your gender, but your sexuality changing and can change. And that's an interesting aspect of, someone who may be transgender that maybe isn't necessarily discussed a lot. The fact that, you could be a trans man or a trans woman, and that aspect of yourself might change, but also too, your sexuality might change. And that's kind of crazy.
It's so crazy. And I don't think people warn you. My therapist did not warn me. But I found myself dating a lot of men. So there was like 2 years, the past 2 years, where I dated a lot of men. And I was in a lesbian community before, and I had to step away from my community because that wasn't my community anymore. And so that changes who you can date and who, like, privileges and entitlements and things like that. But sexuality, yeah, it's strange to say, oh, I'm hairy and now I like this man thing that's hairy.
So Cameron, are you in Los Angeles or are you in Dallas, Texas now?
I'm in Dallas, Texas now.
And you moved back to Dallas from being in LA?
Yes. So I was in LA for 11 months. And then my mother came down with breast cancer. And so she was living with my sister, and I moved in with them to help support with her treatment. And so while I moved here, I stopped all of my music gigs. I was playing with Madame Gandhi and doing work for Arrows and doing What a Weekend stuff, which I love those two people. And I had to leave those gigs and then went back here and studied Reiki. Is what I ended up doing. And so while my mom was going through the treatments, I was giving her additional Reiki so that she could be daily functional. And so I just stayed here and made some music. And right now I'm actually thinking about moving into aviation, aeronautics, and mechanical engineering and engineering. So
wow.
Yeah.
So in 2023, anti-trans bills continue to be introduced across America. There are some 537 bills, 49 states, 63 have passed, 377 are active, 97 have failed. This is from translegislation.com. So here's the question. What are your thoughts on all the anti-LGBT, the anti-trans legislation that seems to be sweeping America in 2023? What are your thoughts on this, living in Dallas, Texas?
My goodness. Well,
I know it's a big question, but generally speaking, what are your thoughts on what's been happening over the last few years?
Well, I personally get upset about it because it's really nobody's business. You know what I mean? And you have these conversations. I have these conversations with people about passing a lot, which is annoying. And if I come out to someone, they say, "Oh, I couldn't tell. Normally you can tell," or something like this. And that sort of mentality is seeming to me what the legislation is based off of this. Your business is my business, because I'm afraid that I like someone like you or I know someone like you. And in Texas, I faced a bit of discrimination. And I won't go into it, but it's very strange. Whereas when I lived in LA, there wasn't really that.
Why do you think this is happening now?
I think, there could be two aspects of it. I think I think it's heavily COVID related. I think it's heavily isolation related, where we spent 2 years or so in isolation, not really getting our synapses flowing, or talking to human beings because we're on the phone texting. I even spoke to my therapist about this, and he was saying that you have to call someone or hear their voice in order for your brain to light up, whereas a text does not even do that. You have to call someone or see someone. And I think that within that isolation, I think a lot of people sort of built up paranoias on power in their own home. And they walk out and then they discriminate against other people because their isolation is different from those people's isolation. When really we're all just trying to figure out unemployment, or you're trying to figure out your next job, or you have to move, or you have to sell a car, you have to get a car. And I want to say that it didn't help with Trump's administration because he was the one going around saying this is how you tell someone's trans. And regardless if you believe that, there was a narrative on it, you know what I'm saying? And then you get people who are in your circle saying, well, I never could tell blah, blah, blah. And that's not their opinion. It's not their business.
Mm. So, Cameron, you are a musician. You are a producer, a music producer. You are also a healer. You were talking before about getting into Reiki. You are a Reiki master. First of all, Reiki. What is Reiki? Can you break that down for us?
Yes, Reiki is, well, it stands for Universal Life Force Energy. I like to talk, I used to talk a bit more about the physics of it, but essentially what you're doing is you, the Reiki healer, are acting as a conduit to particles that are then being transferred from light into your body. And so that is like a hyper accelerated healing because you're using another person's body essentially to speed up a connection. So I would do hands-off healing. I would stay about 6 inches to a foot off of a person's body, and it's about textures and physical and emotional pains, I think, a little bit more so than the spiritual, because those two steps or those two categories involve the other. And so with Reiki, there's interesting things that you can heal. You can heal Atlantean wounds. If you know anything about Atlantean wounds?
No. I was going to ask you, what are Atlantean wounds?
Atlantean wounds, those are, so there's a phenomenon about a person who's been or is from Atlantis or something, and it's essentially it's you feeling a catastrophic event, or you being alive before during a catastrophic event, but it's affecting maybe your workflow, your karmic cycle, or just your focus. You're just like, I think something bad's going to happen at this time, and I don't know why. And so you can go into Reiki and be in meditation while the Reiki practitioner is doing that, and they can open your chakras so that you are activating muscle memory and also, memories from the external and the internal. So you can then bring out that moment as a texture for them or a color association.
Like a past life experience you're bringing to the surface.
Yes, exactly. So that's a fun, interesting one. But with my mother, I did multi-band healing, or multi-light band healing. And so essentially when you're in practice, you can essentially make a Band-Aid out of light by color association from the chakras that is then healing other centers of your body by activating those chakras. So what I did for my mom was I would do a basic healing in the morning, just a little tune-up, and see if she was emitting heat from her chakras or not, or coldness. And I would balance those, and then we would do some ego cleansing for her, and she would be on her way, and she would feel better.
How's your mom doing today?
She is great. She is out of treatment. She is at work right now, and she's living her best life. She's so happy. She's so much happier.
Well done.
Yeah.
How did you get introduced to Reiki originally?
When I was 22 or 23, I was in New York, and I actually had an interview in which someone was like, "What was your pipe dream?" And I had to think about it. And I remember doing all this research during college, and I was doing a lot of mindfulness meditation and yoga. And I said, wouldn't it be interesting to have a Reiki healing house, specifically for entertainers? And so that's what I wanted to do in my older years. And it just happened that when I went home, when my mom got sick, my sister ended up paying for the class, and I ended up studying. So I did end up opening a business, but then found that the treatments they're about 6 months between. So you either have to see a lot of people or see consistent people in order for it to feel good to both parties. And I found a lot of research online, and then I started studying with books like Diane Stein's Reiki, the Yasui Manual, and there's one other Reiki book, but I cannot remember the name of it. But I just went into intense self-study, and it was a self-study class, and it was amazing.
So let's switch gears. Let's talk about, we're going from healing to TV.
All right.
I believe it's 2017, 2018, a song of yours got placed on MTV's Teen Mom.
Oh, wow.
Is this accurate?
Yes. Ready, set, go?
Well, first of all, a big congrats on that.
Thank you.
And when you got the news that your song was going to be on MTV, what went through your mind when you got that news?
Oh my gosh, I have a crazy story about this, and it's so unfortunate because I acted a little bit in ignorance and in fear because I saw it before I got the email from the company.
You saw the episode?
Yeah, I saw the episode before it happened, and so I was like, "Mom, what's going on?" Like, my thing's on there, and I was convinced that they stole it for like 5 minutes, and then I had to talk to 2 people. And they said, no, it didn't get stolen. We placed it for you. And I was like, wow. And I thanked them. And it was it was really embarrassing. But that was my first big placement because I was worried because people were getting their songs stolen. Or that was like the worry, I guess, of the industry was people were writing like indie songs, getting them placed, and then people were covering them or something like this. But that was really good. That was through a company called Marmoset. Marmoset Music in Portland. I love them.
So have you had others since?
Yeah, and so I've had Microsoft and Fitbit, and then I think T-Mom does another song that I did through. It was a collaboration this time, and they did another song as well. So. That's really cool, and that's been the most helpful part to my career has been those sort of placements.
I would think so. How do you feel having that under your belt? Because not a lot of indie artists can say that.
Yeah, I don't really know. I feel very grateful because it's a big deal because it paid my rent a few times. It also increased my fan base in different countries, which is the cool thing. because the way that people interact with music in different countries is really interesting.
Mm. And as a trans artist, having your songs placed on TV with, various entities, well done. Well done.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
So like I've mentioned, you're a musician, you're a singer, you're a songwriter, you're a producer. Do you produce other artists?
I do.
And would you produce, say, other trans artists?
Yes, and I have once.
And how was that experience?
That was a really good experience. That was working with Arrows, who was on MTV. I forget which one he was on. But he became a good friend of mine during the process, and I lived close by, and so he could come to my place with all the gear. And we would have writing sessions, and those are easier because our stories are a little bit more similar. And that was a lot of, well, it was like work for hire. And so I would write his instrumentals, and then he would come back with the lyrics. And most of the time, or if not all the time, they always fit. And so that was a really good duo, I thought.
So there's a track of yours, I mentioned it earlier, Paper Bag. What's this track about?
Oh my goodness. It's a breakup song. It's a breakup song before it happens. But it's not in a salacious way. It's when you're dating someone and they haven't made you their boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever. And they know that it's not going to last, but they're just keeping you there. But you don't really mind because you didn't have expectations with the person. And so it's about feeling mucky about it and feeling mucky about yourself in relation to love, but then, realizing or saying that you are in being or out of being, and that's the way that you are.
So Cameron, here's my last question for you. And I often ask this question. What do you hope audiences come away with after they've experienced one of your songs?
Oh, wow. I hope they get a cheat code. I hope they get a relationship cheat code.
What is
so
a relationship what?
A relationship cheat code. So
cheat code. Okay.
Yes. So I hope that they get a piece of relationship advice for themselves, in relation to themselves, and then a piece of advice in relation to their partner or their friend.
Well said. Well said. Cameron Danielle Grubb, I have to say thank you so much for your time. Well said, well done, well recorded. Thanks for being on the show.
Yes, thank you, Mark Tara. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for your support all these years. I'm glad that you still play the music.
For even more on Cameron Danielle Grubb, you can find them on your favorite streaming service.
Hi, I'm Keegan Hurst, former professional rugby player, coach, raving homosexual, and you're listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
Hi, my name is Joanne Vanicola, and I'm an actor and a writer, and I was first on Rainbow Country with Mark Tara on discussing the massacre at Pulse Club in Orlando. I realized how important it was for our community to have a radio station, specifically for our issues, to talk about people in the LGBTQ community and to provide an outlet for our stories, to discuss our politics, culture, and give voice to the issues that matter to us. And of course, our artists and the things that we do globally, and talk about culture. And without people like Mark Tara providing a space for this with a radio show like this, then we wouldn't have that voice. So support, tune in. Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Bennett Singer, a documentary filmmaker and the co-director of the new film Cured. You are listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.
Up next, Moonage Daydream.
Are you there, David?
You're aware of a deeper existence.
Are you there, David?
Maybe a temporary reassurance that indeed there is no beginning, no end. And you find yourself struggling to comprehend a deep mystery.
This is ground control to Major Tom. You've really made the grade. And the papers want to know whose shirts you wear.
Ever since I was 16, I was determined we'd have the greatest adventure that any one person could ever have.
I'm an alligator. I'm a mama papa calling for you. I'm the space invader. I'll be a rock and roller bitch for you.
And how about the shoes? Are those men's shoes or women's shoes or bisexual shoes? They're shoes, silly. What's your fantasy?
Bowie.
Brett Morgen, hi, how are you?
I'm great, thanks. How are you?
I am well. I have to say I am much better now that I am speaking with you, especially to talk about your new documentary, a documentary on David Bowie, Moonage Daydream. Let's start here. To me, this is a multimedia experience on David Bowie. Talk to me about the story that you're getting at, the story that you're telling in Moonage Daydream.
Well, it's interesting, you see, because I wasn't interested per se in the motivating force behind this film was not a narrative, and it wasn't biographical. It was more inspired by creating a kind of a David Bowie experience. It's like rather than building a theme park ride in every town, we're just kind of taking over those cinemas. So that's kind of where this all started, with just kind of creating a space for audiences to have an engagement with David. It ended up becoming a sort of mythical journey through David's creative and spiritual journey through life. It's fashioned, ironically, a little bit kind of like a hero's myth, in the sense that David is constantly creating challenges and storms for himself to sort of test himself. But ultimately, it's really kind of a roadmap for how to lead a creative and balanced and fulfilled life in an age of chaos and fragmentation.
So we have concert footage, we have interviews, we have music, we have animation. All these elements are like jigsaw puzzles that are telling this narrative, this experience. How did you settle on all of those elements and even more?
Well, David's through line is so to step back, I screened through. We had access to everything in the David Bowie archive. And then we went out and spent several years going around the world collecting all known media related to David. And when I screened through it all, the through line emerged very quickly. David, and it was stated by David time and time again, which was transience, and chaos and fragmentation are his through line. So it was once that was sort of established, what I did was I kind of broke that down into different components, be it spirituality or his recording process, or being kind of living in transit, gender fluidity. There were several different sort of factors that went into exploring that sort of overarching theme. And the movie incorporates all known Bowie media, so it's dance and film and music, and all kind of mixed into this kind of kaleidoscopic fantasia.
What is he? Man? Woman? What is this? Ladies and gentlemen, David Bowie. Within the first 15 minutes of this film, we see David Bowie talking about his being bisexual. You just talked a bit about going across the globe to find footage of David Bowie. Did anything interesting or surprising come to you as a result of finding all these various footage files? Did anything surprise you?
David Bowie's, I think, one of the most fascinating talents to embark on this sort of exploration with. I'm going to say that basically every moment for the 2 years that I screened through footage was illuminating, fascinating, revealing. The only time I might have got bored was a little bit in the watching like my 90th Glass Spider tour concert, but short of that, I found him endlessly fascinating. And watching David Bowie he's like one of the most beautiful humans that's walked the earth during my lifetime. So there's that on top of everything else. But to give you something specific, the two things that really leaped out of me were very kind of macro moments. One was I was watching an interview with him once from like 87. And when David started out, all the rock critics and rock writers were kind of like on his wavelength, and they knew his sources of inspiration and they could speak all the reference points. And then he got into the 80s and suddenly he's talking to reporters who really didn't really understand him. People, from Entertainment Tonight and whatnot. And I was watching this one interview with this kind of daft reporter, journalist, and I was like, oh God, this is going to be awful. She clearly has no idea who he is. And during the pre-roll to that interview, David engaged her in this lovely conversation about the books he'd been reading, and this is all off camera, and the books that he wanted to know what she'd been reading. And I looked at that moment, and I said, man, this is incredible. This guy sees every moment as an opportunity for an exchange. And he is constantly present in every moment. He's someone who had an appreciation for the brevity of life from the start. There was a moment really early on in my process where I was taken into his, Tony Visconti, David's longtime producer, took me into his recording studio to play me the raw tapes for a song called Signet Committee from 1970. And towards the end of the song, David sings, I want to live, I want to live, I want to live. And Tony ISO'd all the music, and I could hear David sobbing uncontrollably as he said this. And David was like 18 at the time, and he was crying like a man who's on his last day on earth. And that was also incredibly illuminating, because it was, we think, and we've been, I think, sort of say in the film that, as you get older, you gain an appreciation for the brevity of life. But David kind of understood that from the very beginning. went about having, one of the most adventurous and creative and fulfilling lives of anyone in, the 20th century.
Before you started this film, were you a fan of David Bowie?
Oh God, yes. I mean, well, fan is such a, I get, fan has so many different components.
Had you met him before in person?
Yeah. Well, hold on a sec. That's a stretch going, are you a fan to have you met him, right? Because I didn't meet him because I was a fan. I met him through work, but I was if I could say for a minute as being a fan, David was the first artist that I curated on my own, meaning prior to that, I was 11 or 12 when he entered my life. And I like to joke, I don't know what came first, Bowie or puberty, but they kind of had this, the same impact of kind of changing everything that I knew. And so I'm 53. So when I was 12, it was Scary Monsters and Ashes to Ashes. Mm. And, he came into my life at a point, and, this is no internet. So at that point, there was, he was kind of my introduction to culture, to Bertolt Brecht, to William Burroughs, to all sorts of worlds outside of my limited one. And he was, I think, and he served this role for so many of us where, at that moment where you feel strange and different and you don't understand why you're not like your parents and all these questions we have at that point about our identity. I think David was there even when I was 11 or 12 to basically tell us that our differences were our strengths. And there really weren't a lot of people kind of waving that flag. So David represented so much to me, freedom and intellect and grace and, sexuality, of course. So he had a huge impact on me at that age. I met him in 2007 to discuss doing a kind of hybrid nonfiction project that unfortunately it would have required him shooting for 40 days, and he had sort of retired by that point. But it was, my impression of him reflected back now of meeting with him was exactly kind of the same as what I got from the footage, which was he was entirely present. There was nothing else happening in the world. He was totally locked in and engaged. And yeah.
Brett, I have two last questions for you. And here's the second to last question. 1999, On the Ropes, your boxing documentary, nominated for an Academy Award for in the Best Documentary category. That nomination, that Oscar nomination, what does that mean to you?
Oh, it did nothing. It's really one of the things that so that was 23 years ago. And it's kind of a cliche, but the reality is after every movie, you have to start over again. It's not like there's this endless phone calls or job offers, and usually the job offers that come in aren't that appealing. I remember a couple years ago, I got nominated. I had this movie Jane, and we got 7 Emmy nominations, and I got 4 myself. And I remember having breakfast, the phone wasn't ringing, nobody cared. It didn't really matter. So
damn that.
It's so funny. It's these things you think they're going to be so life changing, and it means something to my mom. She gets to boast to her friends, and but then that's more about her narcissism and less about my art. So it's kind of probably not the answer you're expecting.
My last question for you. So, quote, among the best films of any artist I've ever seen, unquote. That's from Vogue magazine. Here's a question. What do you hope audiences come away with after they've seen Moonage, Daydream?
Oh, this is an easy one for me to answer because David Bowie was a canvas that invited us to project onto him, and then he would reflect back to us. So the more you listen to David Bowie, it doesn't help you get closer to David Jones. You end up learning more about yourself. And the way the film is designed is very much in the spirit of Bowie. So it's mysterious, it's enigmatic, it's sexy, it's you know, all these things. But ultimately, the questions that he's positing are meant to kind of reflect back to the viewer. And I think the lesson of the film, the moral of the film is that life is short. Make every moment an adventure. Don't settle for being comfortable. You know, being comfortable is overrated. And David would, whenever he felt comfortable, he would have to change his environment because he wanted to experience as much as he can. So I think it's a film, like, I've had so many people come out of the film and I'm, you know, tell me the next day that they're, I don't want to be whatever, but, you know, thinking very much about their own life, not so much David, but about their own. And I think that's really kind of rare when we go to a cinema, especially given the fact that the whole kind of conceit of the thing was just to have like a sort of theme park ride through David's imagination. So, I think it's really life affirming, and it's not biographical. There's not a lot of facts. There's very little information. You're not going to learn a lot about David Jones, the man, but you're definitely going to swim in David's imagination and I think leave feeling kind of like wowed by this incredible life.
You've had an experience.
I think so. I hope so.
Brett Morgen, thanks for your time. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Mark.
Are you there, David?
You're aware of a deeper existence.
Are you there, David?
Maybe a temporary reassurance that indeed there is no beginning, no end. And you find yourself struggling to comprehend a deep mystery.
This is ground control to Major Tom. You've really made the grade. And the papers want to know whose shirts you wear.
Ever since I was 16, I was determined would have the greatest adventure that only one person could ever have.
I'm an alligator. I'm a mama papa calling for you. I'm the space invader. I'll be a rock and roller bitch for you.
And how about the shoes? Are those men's shoes or women's shoes or bisexual shoes? They're shoes, silly.
Moonage Daydream is available on streaming.
Magnus Hirschfeld made the modern homosexual. He co-founded the world's first gay rights group, the Scientific Humanitarian Committee, in Berlin in 1897. But what is far more important is that he and his colleagues came up with an enormously influential concept of what same-sex desire was, what it meant, and how it fit into the wider world. If you think homosexuality is an inborn quality that cannot be changed and has a biological root, but is not an illness, and if you think gay people are a sexual minority who are born that way and who deserve legal protections just as racial minorities do, you owe those ideas to Hirschfeld and a handful of others. He was among the first to articulate that conceptual model of what it means to be gay in print in 1896.
We just heard professor, author, and historian of queer and trans politics, Laurie Marhofer, reading from Racism and the Making of Gay Rights, a sexologist, his student, and the Empire of Queer Love, their powerful new gay history book about the man who made the modern homosexual, a German physician and sexologist who died at the age of 67 in 1935. Magnus Hirschfeld.
Bill 7, to ban discrimination in employment, government services, and housing, based on a person's sexual orientation, was up for a vote at Queen's Park. Most NDP and Liberal MPPs supported the bill, but without some progressive Conservative legislators backing, a divisive split could rack the province. 4 PCs decided to break party ranks to vote with their conscience and support Bill 7. Cabinet Minister and MPP Dennis Timbrell did it to show solidarity for his beloved brother, the well-known drag queen Rusty Ryan. And for me, a gay politician who was not yet out, I had to take a stand. We were known as the Gang of Four. I'm former Cabinet Minister and MPP Phil Gillies. The date, December 2nd, 1986, when LGBT rights came to Ontario.
And just like that, this little gay journey through Rainbow Country has come to an end. For the full 2-hour episode, simply head over to marktara.com where everything is connected and hit the archives banner. To keep up to date with the show, check out the socials at Mark Tara. The podcast is available on all major platforms. Finally, I want to take this time to thank you for taking your time to be with me. Remember, despite all the craziness in the world these days, know this. We are living in days of making dreams come true. So, believe in yourself. And the world will believe in you.
Hi, this is Police Constable Danielle Botno, also known as LGBT Cop, and you're listening to Rainbow Country with Mark Tara.